Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov, good evening. It is so good to see everybody here after a long time of not seeing everybody's faces. I apologize. Our Chachamim tell us that if you leave the Torah for one day, you end up leaving it for 2 days. We took upon ourselves here in the Midrash a construction project to expand our Beit HaKnesset. Baruch Hashem, we have more than doubled the physical size of our Beit HaKnesset, and it's been 11 years coming, and Baruch Hashem, it is finally 10 years, finally time to make it happen, and we did. But the Kehillat writes that if you are planning ever to remodel your home, if you plan to spend 1,000, you should plan to spend 2,000. And if you think it will take you 1 month, you should take 2 months. And that always these things take a little bit longer than you thought they would take. Maybe even more than that. Advice from the Kehillat. Rabbi Eliezer Papo says that in general you should invest in a business before you invest in a house, because a business will buy you a house, but a house will never buy you a business. The Baruch Hashem, we have a beautiful expanded Beit HaKnesset now. We finally have a kitchen and dining room and social hall. We are welcoming everybody who wishes to come visit us here in San Diego. It will be a big zechut to have you here. I am hoping to have at least a shiur this week. Whether or not I'm able to have a shiur next Monday, I'm traveling first thing Tuesday morning to New York to get ready for the Shabbat there. And I'm very much looking forward to that Shabbat. So for those of you who are registered and are coming, that is going, Baruch Hashem, I'm really more excited than I can say. So let me just say that I'm very excited. I'm eagerly looking forward to greeting all of you personally. I'm not yet sure if I will be able to pull off a shiur next Monday evening, but if I can, I most definitely will, so we can get 2 shiurim in before I make it to New York in person. If not, we'll just continue when I get back the following week from New York. B'ezrat Hashem. We were discussing the Pesukim in Shemot. If you look at the beginning of chapter 23 of Shemot. Lo tisa shema shav. Do not accept a false report. Al tashet yadecha im rasha liot ed hamas. Do not extend your hand with somebody who is evil to be an evil witness. Lo tiyah acharei rabim leraot. You should not be a follower of the majority in order to do evil. V'lo ta'aneh al riv. Lintot acharei rabim lehatot. And don't respond to something that you have in order to yield to the majority to do something against halakha. I don't know if that's the best way to translate that pasuk. You'll see soon that this pasuk has many different ways to read it. V'da lo tehedar berivo, and don't glorify a poor person when he comes to you in the bedin to fight with someone else. Ki tifga shor oyivcha o chamoro toeh, hashev teshivenu lo. If you come across the ox or the donkey of your enemy, it's lost, you should return it to him. Ki tireh chamor sona'acha rovetz tachat masa'o, v'chadalta me'azov lo, azov ta'azov imo. If you see the donkey of somebody that you hate and it's suffering under a tremendous burden, don't hold back from helping him, you must help him. Lo tateh mishpat evyonecha berivo. Don't pervert the judgment of somebody poor. Midvar sheker tirchak, stay away from lies. V'naki v'tzadik al taharog, and don't kill somebody who's innocent. Ki lo atzdik rasha, because I will not exonerate a person who's wicked. V'shochad lo tikach, do not accept a bribe. Ki hashochad ya'avir pikchim v'yisalef divrei tzadikim, because bribery blinds even the eyes of the most wise. V'ger lo tilchatz, don't oppress. We'll use here just the word ger. Later we'll discuss the halakha. V'atem yida'atem bet nefesh hager ki gerim hayitim be'eretz Mitzrayim. Because you know the soul, the feelings of a ger, because you also were gerim in Eretz Mitzrayim. Until now, we've discussed numerous parts of this section. Today I want to focus on Pasuk Bet. לא תהיה אחרי רבים לרעות, ולא תענה על ריב לנטות, אחרי רבים להטות. There are essentially 3 halachot that we learn from these Pasukim, and each one of them deserves proper attention. For those who may just be joining us now for the first time, or it's been a while since you last joined us, it's been a while since we all last joined us, but we are going through all of the biblical texts that are going to be the sources for the laws of Sanhedrin of the Rambam. I'm planning in the near future to dive headfirst into chapter 1 of the laws of Sanhedrin of the Rambam, but I figured before we do that, before we read rabbinic law, we should understand the Torah law that is there before. And so we are going to taste a little bit of the different chapters of the Rambam's Hilchot Sanhedrin. And for today, these are the tastings that we're going to have. If you have a Mishneh Torah in front of you, wonderful. If not, you're welcome to just continue with me on the source sheet. We spoke last time about Lashon Hara. Let's look at halacha number 1. So if you're going to open up Mishneh Torah, Laws of Sanhedrin, chapter 8, halacha number 1.
Can you please repeat it?
Yes, if you're going to go to the book of Shofetim, the laws of Sanhedrin, and you want to find chapter 8. It would be just the beginning of chapter 8 of the Rambam's laws of Sanhedrin. So it's in our source sheet, it's source number 9. You ready? Bedin, a bedin, shenechleku, that are torn on the matter of judgment. Miktsatan omerin zakai, miktsatan omerin chayav. Some of the bedin says he is innocent. Some of the bedin say that he's guilty. Holechin acha harov, we follow the majority. V'zo mitzvat aseh la Torah. And this is a biblical Torah requirement. Shenemar, like it says in the book of Shemot, acharei rabim lehatot, we lean the law according to the majority. Bameh devarim amurim. In which context is this said? That you follow the majority if the bedin is split. B'dinei mamonot. Uveshar dinei isur veheter, v'tameh v'tahor v'chayotze behen. Regarding financial matters and other matters of that which is permissible or prohibited, which is pure or impure. Aval b'dinei nefashot. But when it comes to dinei nefashot are capital crimes. Crimes that are connected to people's lives. אם נחלקו בזה החוטא, אם ייהרג או לא ייהרג, if they have a question whether this person is innocent or guilty, whether he should be executed or not. אם היו הרוב מזכין, זכאי. If the majority says that he is innocent, we let him off the hook. ואם היו הרוב מחייבין, and if the majority considers him to be guilty, אינו נהרג, we do not execute him, עד שיהיו המחייבין יתר על המזכין שניים. We don't execute him until the number of dayanim who consider him to be guilty are at least 2 more than those who consider him to be innocent. So what's the difference between dinei nefashot and dinei mamonot, for example, financial matters and capital crimes, when it comes to the majority?
Simple majority.
Say it again, Amma.
Simple majority. One extra convicted.
So 1 extra when it comes to being innocent, both of them will agree that he's innocent, correct? Simple majority by innocence, both Batei Din will exonerate him. When it comes to dinei nefashot, by mamonot, when it comes to money, a simple majority can also convict him. But what about dinei nefashot? How many more do we need?
2 more.
2 more. So we need 2 more. The reason for this, acharei rabim, we have to follow the majority when it comes to leraot. The pasuk began. Let's hear. Mipi hashemua lamdu. From the shemua we heard. What is shemua? Meaning from the oral tradition we heard. Very good. Shal zeh hizhir b'Torah v'amar. That this is what it warns about in the Torah when it says, Lo tiyeh acharei rabim leraot. You should not follow the majority to do harm. Klumar, im hayu harov notim lera'a. If the majority are trying to do something wrong, bad, is it bad to execute a criminal? If someone is liable to the death penalty, is it a ra'ot in order to execute him?
I think it's not, because it's bringing justice to the world.
Yeah, seemingly it brings justice to the world. But it still is bad in which capacity? That's me being quiet so somebody here can talk.
Bad to the convict.
Yeah, okay, for the person whose life is on the line, it's bad. It's a bad action to take someone's life. Meaning, at the end of the day, we're talking leraot means don't use the word evil, or it's the negative consequence. The negative outcome is that we don't exonerate him, but rather we convict him and therefore execute him. כלומר, אם היו הרוב נוטים לרעה, להרוג, לא תהיה אחריהם עד שייתו הטיה גדולה ויוסיפו המחייבים שניים. Don't do an act that is considered negative, such as executing somebody, until you have a greater majority, 2 people at least, that decide to execute him. שנאמר, לנטות אחרי רבים להטות. הטותך לטובה על פי אחד. To do something to the good, what do? That's according to a simple majority. That's a good phrase my father said. A simple majority. But about executing somebody, ולרעה על פי שניים need to. וכל אלו הדברים, and all of these things, kabbalah him. They are all kabbalah. What does the Rambam mean here when he says kabbalah?
He's reiterating the Yeshua.
Rav Kapach has a ma'amar called Mipi HaKabbalah or Mipi HaShimua. And it's a good thing to study one day. But essentially, Rabbeinu Rambam is forewarning a question that you might have about what? What might be bothering you when you hear the way Chachamim interpret these pesukim?
Where are they getting it from? It sounds like it's just
Right, it doesn't sound like this is exactly what the pesukim are saying. So says Rabbeinu Rambam, this is not actually what the pesukim are saying. Rather, our rabbis have a tradition, Mipi HaShimua, it's a Kabbalah that they have. I'm not telling you necessarily those are synonymous, but close enough. And if you wonder what do the pesukim have to do with it, the pesukim are an asmachta. Chachamim are trying to embellish their knowledge, their pre-existing knowledge, onto a pasuk. Is this the only time that you see Chachamim do this? So, welcome back to the Shiviti Midrash of New York. I'm going to remind you that you're not here in a lecture to just be talked to. I want to hear from you also. And let's learn together. Is this the only time the Chachamim use this methodology?
It's not the first time. Like Olam Haba is not specifically mentioned in the Torah. We are only using psukim like as yeshir to indicate that there is a remez Olam Haba minan.
Okay, you took it all the way to Olam Haba. That's good. Fine. I'm going to say in a more... It's good. That's a good... similar. Tell me. But, okay, what about Basar B'Chalav?
We pull the halacha out of a very simple that we shouldn't put a kid in its mother's milk, but all the union of the halacha is pulled out by the Chachamim.
Okay, so what's the point of Chachamim then, embellishing their ideas onto the Mikra when that's not necessarily what the Mikra means? What's the point?
And to show they're not creating something new. Even if it's not exactly what it means, it's based on something that came with it.
Okay, so I'm going to quote here for the Maimonideans here. I'm not apologizing, just you might want to brace yourself. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato has a ma'amar on the Torah Shebal Peh. And in there he says there's a desire of Chachamim to connect the Torah Shebal Peh with the Torah Shebichtav, even when the things that they are telling you are standalone teachings they received already in an oral tradition. There's a desire to make a connection here. You know, you look sometimes, think about your Siddur. You're reading the Siddur, Tana Dever Eliyahu Zechurato. Kol HaShoneh Halachot B'chol Yom. Anybody who studies halacha every day, Muftach Lo Shu Ben HaOlam Haba, is guaranteed to be a person who has a portion in Olam Haba. Shener Mar Legazez Halichot Olam Lo. Al Tikre Halichot Ela Halachot. Don't read the pasuk Halichot. Read the pasuk Halachot. And therefore, somebody who has halachot olam lo, he receives olam haba because of these halachot. Is that what the pasuk means? Now along comes somebody and says, look at these chachamim. They're busy twisting pasukim. Al tikre banaich, ela bonaich. Look at all the chachamim are not trying to tell you this is what the pasuk means. They have an idea. They have an existing teaching in their hands. And maybe they're trying to get you to remember. There's an understanding that sometimes Chachamim embellish things on Pesukim so you could remember them. If you recall, I once taught a shiur, it could be that it was not in this particular class. I once was speaking with my dear friend Rabbi Abe Foer, should live and be well. And we were talking about, there's a famous argument. I'm mixing a lot of different topics. They're not all the same. I'm just sharing an idea. There's a conversation between Cain and Hevel. You guys remember the Midrash is a famous conversation between the two of them? Anyone?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Rabbi. I came a little late into this year. Where are we reading from right now?
We're reading from the Rambam, Hilchot Sanhedrin, chapter 8, or source 9 in the source sheet. Anyone here remember about Cain and Hevel?
We're talking about the conversation where they were arguing about, it says Vayibio Tamba Sadeh when they were in the field. So it says that in the Midrash, that they argued about the field, meaning who owns the field. And Cain was like, well, get off my earth, because I own the earth. And Hevel says, well, take off the clothing you're wearing, because it came from my sheep, my wool. And then they argue back and forth in, such a manner. And eventually Cain became so
Kills him.
that he murdered him.
Great, that's good, very good. There's another, Chachamim embellish a halacha here onto this story. I'm happy to make this homework and I would love to go through it next week. So, I'm going to ask you, look up the Midrash to see where Chachamim took it. I'll tell you already in advance, though. The answer is that the halachic embellishment of the story is not necessarily a story that ever happened. Rather, Chachamim have a story. They use it as a device for the students to remember halakha. They don't actually think Cain and Hevel were fighting over this halachic matter, but it's a good way to get somebody to remember halakha forever. They're going to remember halakha because of the story. This is something that Chachamim do quite often. So says the Rambam, don't get scared when you see that these pesukim don't exactly align to the halachot that we're reading out of them. And this is a mistake that many people make. They come at the Torah Shebal Peh with criticisms. That's not what the Torah meant. The Torah means this, the Torah means that. But the Chachamim don't mean that's what the Torah means. You came to read a book, you don't understand how to read it. You should read the introduction. Most people don't read the introduction. Why don't they read the introduction? Because they don't have enough humility to read the introduction. You have to know how to read the Talmud. The Talmud is full of different words, different phrases, different concepts that unless you know them, you won't really understand what Chachamim are trying to do. We'll speak more about this in New York. I have a shiur scheduled on the Shabbat about this topic. But let's get there. The next halakha that's in the source sheet is from the Rambam, chapter 10. So skip Tet. You know what? It's not a bad idea. Let's look at Tet for a minute, if we're here anyways. Look in the next chapter, 9. It might not be in my source sheet. In chapter 9 of the Sanhedrin. You see where I am? The first halakha of chapter 9. Rabbeinu Rambam says the following. Sanhedrin. Now, this is the Girsa clearly here. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Kapach has the same one that I have here in my Rambam. Yes? Very good. Okay, thank you. In some Vilna Rambams, I think it says Sanhedrin Gedola. I don't know where that word comes from. Rabbi Chaim David Halevi in his just says Sanhedrin. It's the same word. Just an interesting what happens that those words sometimes happen this way. Says Rabbi Rambam, Sanhedrin shepatchu kulan b'dinei nefashot techila. That they all began to deliberate about dinei nefashot, about a capital offense. V'amru kulan chayav. And everybody immediately answers that the person is guilty. Harei ze patur. This person is patur. They are exempt from the death penalty. עד שיהיו שם מקצת מזכים שיהפכו בזכותו. And he's innocent unless there are those who find a way to find innocence for him. וירבו המחייבים, but still there's a majority that decide that he should be executed, ואחר כך ייהרג, and then he's executed. So what's the story here? The Sanhedrin sees a criminal, and they all decide that he needs to be executed. Correct? Immediately, we decide that this person is innocent. Why?
Because nobody fought on his behalf. Nobody argued for him. So it was almost like it was an unfair judgment.
Different things have been said here trying to explain this halakha. There are many different commentaries that explain this halakha differently. And when we get to this halakha, I'm certain that we're going to get through all of those different opinions. But two things that you could walk away with is one, definitely there's an element here that if the Sanhedrin sees this man and they all decide that he's guilty, what does it tell you about him?
About the person?
Yeah, what does it tell you about the person who's on trial?
They're biased
Why do we all jump to accuse the Sanhedrin of bias?
because all of them convey. Someone has to disagree.
What if you saw? Hold on, let me ask you a question. If the Sanhedrin right now was going to put on trial Yemach Shemo V'Zichro, Yichye Sinwar, what do you think the Sanhedrin is going to decide?
Guilty.
No, so are they biased?
That's what the pastor says, no? לא ביחס רבים לעשות.
What does it tell you about the person who's on trial?
He's probably guilty.
If the whole Sanhedrin sees a person and they say this person is guilty, why would you not assume first that maybe this person is really guilty? Why everybody goes yashat to accuse the Sanhedrin of being biased?
Just my opinion. That's that I didn't read it as well.
What's going to happen if the Sanhedrin decides he's innocent? What are you going to think about them then?
For me, the reason why I said it was because of the next sentence about someone should seek, argue on his behalf. That was why I responded that way. But I would think that they would have the evidence to prove, or when they made that decision to say he's guilty or he's innocent, not just based off of, if they would have to have the evidence or whatever the case may be. So I don't believe they exist aligned is dead, but based off of this, I just thought because nobody argued on his behalf to say, well, hey, maybe not, maybe he's innocent, let's look at something, but everybody was like, no, out the gate. So, I'm guessing here.
No, don't. You're doing good. Let's do this. Let me ask a different question. I'll answer that question. I'll explain another halakha, and let me get back to answer the question I just asked you. You can hold with me for a few minutes? Okay, so let's just transition to the second half. If a person is on trial and the whole Sanhedrin decided he's guilty, and we say, what can we do? We can't kill him. What message does that give to bona fide criminals?
I got you.
Now, what message does it give to the criminals?
We can do it again.
Why is that the message it gives them?
Because they were lenient on us. There's no repercussions for his actions.
Because there are no repercussions for their actions. Very good. Very good. Pause this Rambam with me. Just pause for a second. And remember another halakha with me. Okay, another halakha. Look with me in the same book of Shofetim, but you want to go to the Laws of Kings, chapter 3. The Laws of Kings, Melachim, chapter 3, Perek Gimel. Rav Kapach suggests that we should look here to answer that second question. Kol hahorgin nefashot. I mean, the end of chapter 3, it should maybe be halakha yud by yud. See yod? Kol hahorgin nefashot. Shelo biraya berura. Or belo hatra'ah. Somebody who killed somebody else, but there was no clear proof, there was no warning. Afilu be'ed echad, there was maybe even if there's only one witness. O soneh sheharag bishgaga, or if there's a person who killed somebody else intentionally, but it was because of anger, hatred. If you look in the laws of murder, chapter 6, there's a little bit of a different penalty for a person who kills someone out of hate. He's not exactly able to go to an Ir Miklat. He's also not exactly a regular murderer. Tov, we'll get to those halachot one day also. Yes, I mean, these are people that the Bedin cannot execute. There were not the correct number of witnesses, or there was the type of testimony that was given is not able to be used in Bedin to execute them. Says the Rambam, Yesh lamelech reshut laharut, and the king, read the government, the civil courts of that time, have permission to execute those people. Ultaken haolam, and to fix society, kefi ma she'asha'at tzricha, based on what those times need. V'horeg rabim biyom echad, he can kill multiple people in one day. The Bedin cannot do that. We don't execute 2 people in one day. V'tolen, they can hang him, his body, u'manichan tiluin yamim rabim, and unlike the Sanhedrin, the body can stay hung for many days. Lehatil ema, to put the awe of the law into the people. V'lishbor yad rish'ei ha'olam, and to break the hands of the wicked in the world. Meaning, when the Sanhedrin cannot execute a person, it doesn't mean that the person will not face judgment. What it means is that Mishpat Tzedek cannot be done, like we've discussed before. And we now rely on a secondary court to take action and say, listen, if we're in a perfect society, maybe the guy really walks. That's how it was supposed to be, min Torah. But if we know that by letting him walk, murderers will be emboldened, that they will do more evil in the world, then we pass him to the other Bedin, and the other Bedin does with him what is allowed within the laws of the Bedin to do. Here, this tikkun olam, when you talk about tikkun olam, this is a tikkun olam. You can't allow for evildoers to get away with evil, and you can't let a person out on some legality. That would be a problem. If you look also in the laws of Sanhedrin, so I'm back in Sanhedrin. In chapter 24, Halacha 4, Chav Daled, Daled. Rabbeinu HaRambam says the Bedin has the same power יש לבדין להלקות מי שאינו מחויב מלכות ולהרוג מי שאינו מחויב מיתה, לא לעבור על דברי תורה, אלא לעשות סייג לתורה. There are times where temporarily the Beit Din can say that we are taking the law into our own hands. We are not going to rule in accordance with the Torah. We're going to punish or execute a person because that is what needs to be done to make sure that criminals know that there is a law that they must reckon with. But they can't do it to override the Torah. It's only temporary. וכיוון שרואים בדין שפרצו העם בדבר, יש להם לגדור ולחזק הדבר כפי מה שיראה להם. And when the Bedin sees that a nation is really doing wrong in a certain area, they can do what it takes to keep the people, to push them back in line. הכל הוראת שעה, all of this is only a temporary measure. לא שיקבע הלכה לדורות. Not so you should, שיקבע, is not so that you should establish a halacha forever. Meaning, the Bedin can't rule against the Torah. But we recognize that sometimes the Torah's rules may be so narrow that we are going to allow criminals to get away with, literally with murder. It's a very delicate system here. That there's a law, but there are ways around the law. Some kind of executive order, if you can imagine. You can't use it forever, but sometimes you need to use it because if you don't, worse things can happen. I can take a tangent with you. Will you be okay with me taking a tangent? This Shabbat, we read about the Sotah. Probably one of the most misunderstood halachot in the world. And every year people get stuck on the same questions they always had and they never answered. I'm not here to make sense of the whole Sotah, but a point that I shared with the Kehillat here on Shabbat. What's the story of the sotah? It's a woman who her husband warns her not to be alone with another man. And there's a process, he warns her. She does it anyways. And then what happens? What's the next step?
It goes to the
There's only one witness.
Okay, what happens?
They bring it to the Kohen.
Witness. She said, who said that she was with this man, that the husband warned her not to be with. I guess she was with him. One witness.
Okay, and then what happens? What's the story that happens?
They bring it to the Kohen.
They bring her to the Kohen and the Mikdash, and there's a whole very humiliating process that she goes through. They uncover her hair, unbraid her hair. Minastam is more what happens there. They make her drink the bitter water. Then, and if she is guilty, then her stomach explodes. If she's also the one that she had an affair with, but he doesn't go through the same process in the Mikdash. That's part of the story. And if not, then she gets a beracha to be with her husband. They should have who wants to go back to the husband that put her through the whole story? Everybody has questions on the story of Sotah. It's not a simple parasha. But there's one halakha in the laws of Sotah that nobody ever talks about. The halakha in the laws of Sotah is very clear that a woman is only put through this process of Sotah on one condition. What's that condition?
that her husband didn't do anything
Marlene was here on Shabbat.
in his own past. Yes.
Yes, Marlene was here on Shabbat. That her husband has no history, not even from when he was a child, of any kind of sexual impropriety. Propriety, that's the word I'm looking for. No misconduct on his end. Because if he's a Rasha, even if it was when he was a teenager, even when he was it doesn't matter. If the level of Kiddusha in his home is not in the heavens, he has no right to put somebody else through that. Why nobody reads this halakha, I don't know. I'm not clear exactly why people skip the main condition. Likely there are very few people, especially if they went to high school in America, very few people who can ever even be in the story of the Sotah in the first place. But let's a little deeper. HaShamayim tell us in the Talmud that when people as a whole began to misbehave in a sexual fashion, our rabbis stopped doing the Sotah ceremony entirely. There's another halakha similar to that one, another teaching in the Talmud, when another group of people became very prominent. Who else? When the Jewish community became full of murderers, our rabbis stopped trying capital crimes. Why? Why would you stop? Now is the time you should be executing people. Now you're stopping? What's the point? Okay, Marlene, you were here on Shabbat. Go.
Yeah, everybody seems to accept it. It's like becomes the norm.
If something becomes the norm, so what? Then that's exactly the reason we should step up to the plate.
The punishment isn't working.
Very good. That's not working. Nobody's afraid of the law. So now to kill everybody alive is not the solution. I mean, like ISIS solution, yes, but that's not the solution for when you're a society that is very sensitive to murder, and you have a crazy person, gets up and murders somebody. In that situation, the Bedin steps in, takes care of this crime, and executes a person. But when everybody is murderers, that means that nobody cares anymore about murder. That means that nobody cares anymore about the Sanhedrin. So now you're going to kill him, you're going to kill her, you're going to kill everybody. So what are you going to have? A lot of dead people. That's what you're going to have. And what is your capital offense accomplishing? Nothing. Go deeper. You recall back in the day we studied the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim. Rabbeinu Nisim said the Sanhedrin has two purposes. One is to execute, meaning to convict people of crimes. What was the primary job of the Bedin? All of you were there, so I'm not buying it. You don't remember.
to help between brothers or two parties to make a decision.
So they do that by convicting, by deciding judgment. What is the other job of the Sanhedrin?
To execute them?
What do you call the head of the Sanhedrin? What is his name? That's the second in command of the Sanhedrin. The first in command, Nasi, otherwise known as, what's his real title? The Av Bet Adin is number 2. The first one is the Nasi, but he has another title. His primary title is?
It's a political title.
No, he has a title. He has a title. Come. Open up chapter 1 of the Mishnah of the Laws of Sanhedrin.
To educate the people.
Here, Laws of Sanhedrin, Halakha number, chapter 1, Halakha number 3. Hagadol shebechokhma shebekulan. Hagadol bechokhma shebekulan. The greatest of all of the Chachamim in the Sanhedrin, Moshivin oto rosh alehem. He sits at the head of all of them. V'hu rosh hayeshiva. He is the rosh hayeshiva. V'hu shekorin oto Chachamim Nasi bechol makom. He is the one who is referred to as the Nasi in every place. V'hu ha'omed tachat Moshe Rabbeinu. And he is the one who sits in place. It's a very terrifying job to have. It's awesome. It's not just one of authority, but one of responsibility. He sits in the place of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu who what?
Could you repeat that, please?
Who is Moshe Rabbeinu to us?
Rabbeinu, he's our teacher.
Our teacher. Primarily, the job of the Sanhedrin is to educate the people. He is the Rosh HaYeshiva. That's his job. That's the job of the Sanhedrin. When the Sanhedrin failed at educating the people, then you have a world that is full of murderers and cheaters and liars and crooks. But then you can't blame them. You can't go kill them. There was a time where the judges judged. And there was famine on earth. Whose fault was the famine? Say our rabbis, when you see destruction in the world, go look at the judges of the Jewish people. Someone's doing their job wrong. Something's not happening correctly here. So when the Sanhedrin recognizes that justice mode is not working, they have to stop and realize we now have a job to re-educate the people. While we re-educate the people, to go back to levels of Kedusha, Tahara, of following the law, of caring about the law enough to follow it, we are not busy killing everybody. That only works in a very small scale, to very extreme cases. Maybe a lot of the teachings of the Chachamim surrounding capital crime you may now understand. Bedin that executes people too regularly, they're hanging things. But the Bedin's job is to execute people. That's the point. The point is, though, not to bring people to that place where all day we are executing people. This leads back to the halakha that we skipped. In chapter 9, we ask why a Sanhedrin that is immediately accusing someone of being guilty, we exempt him from the law. This is a Torah rule. The rule is from the Torah. I don't have... Now, everything else I'm going to say is a reason. A reason that's maybe true or maybe not true. There are definitely those that suggested, like Ronit suggested, that what kind of Bedin can't find not one good thing in a person to exonerate them? What kind of Bedin is that? There's not one Chacham sitting here who has one good thing to say. But in order to understand the complaint, you really have to understand the 10th chapter of the Laws of Sanhedrin of the Rambam. So come with me. I know I'm jumping with you. Forgive me that I'm jumping, but it's important for us to get this picture or else we won't understand the context. So look with me in Halakha, chapter number 10, Halakha 1. In order to understand these halachot, you need to know that when the Sanhedrin rules on a halacha, there are two stages. There's the deliberation stage, and then there's the verdict stage, when one is actually convicted of a crime. In the words of the Rambam, there's shat masau matan. There's a time of back and forth, like we use that word for business, give and take, where there's deliberation. And then there's a shat gemardin, a time of actually completing the judgment. Now that's obvious to our Chachamim that we would know that. It's not so obvious to everybody in the world that that's how the Sanhedrin works. Perhaps you can think a little bit about the way that our rabbis look at Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim. Maybe you want to go to Hoshana Rabbah. Maybe you're a Kabbalist, you go a little further than that. The idea that there is time to deliberate in judgment before a verdict is actually reached. In the Masau Matan stage, in the deliberation stage, there's a third halakha that comes from these Pesukim. We're going to study it right now. But in the verdict stage, in the Masau Matan, in the deliberation stage, Chachamim argue with each other in favor, against, bringing proofs this way, bringing proofs that way. The Chachamim are split in and of themselves. What should we do with the person in front of us? They're deliberating. In the time of deliberation, everybody is welcome to the deliberation, even those who are otherwise not kasher to sit in the Sanhedrin. People that are related to the Dayanim, people that otherwise you wouldn't have them sitting in the Bedin, but if they have what to add, especially if it is to help a person become innocent, to exonerate them, then in that situation we count almost everybody. Only when we enter phase 2, which is the actual execution of the law, in that stage we go back to counting the people who are actually Dayanim that are sitting in the Sanhedrin. Now that you know this, Rabbi Chaim David Halevi suggests a very interesting reading of chapter 9. Back in chapter 9, halacha 1, Sanhedrin shepatchu kulan b'dinei nefashot techila. The Sanhedrin began a capital court case. When it says they began, which part do they begin? Phase 1, deliberation, or phase 2, conviction?
Deliberation.
Deliberation. V'amru kulan chayav, and all of them argue that he's guilty. Harei ze patur. He's exempt. How could it be that the Bedin is sitting down? They're not in the. If all of them decide to convict him at the end of the trial, we get it. We understand why the Sanhedrin would, after reviewing the evidence and hearing all the arguments, every member of the Sanhedrin still feels that he's guilty. Of course, you can execute a person like that. But how could it be shepatchu? They're just beginning the conversation, and they're beginning the conversation already knowing that he's going to be executed. How could it be there's not one member here in the whole room who's able to make an argument? This is no longer an emotional argument that we're saying. This is a logical one. The Torah is very careful that in the deliberation stage, you found nobody. There's not one person in the room, not one person in the community who can stand up and say there's a reason, even a crazy reason, even an outlandish reason to assume that this person doesn't deserve that kind of penalty. I can't wait to actually get to these halachot in the laws of Sanhedrin themselves. There's so much here to pull apart. Let me see though, maybe now that you heard this, let's read chapter 10. We're going to end with these halachot today. Just let's look at them before we end. somebody reached out to me this week and asked me a question. This matter of halakha that you taught, it makes sense to me, but who are you holding like? That's Jewish lingo, because that's not an English phrase. Who are you holding like? Meaning, even though your argument sounded logically correct and halachically sound, but who is the greater person that you are relying on when making such a decision? Let's look at this halakha here. Now we're talking about capital crimes. אחד מן הדיינים בדיני נפשות, one of the judges who was sitting on a capital case, שהיה מן המזכין או מן המחייבים, that he was either from those who in the deliberation stage was either from those who said he argued for innocence or was from those who argued for guilt. לא מפני שאמר דבר הנראה לו בדעתו, but he didn't argue for innocence or for guilt because it was what appeared to him to be correct. אלא נטה אחר דברי חברו, but it was because he wanted to hold like, he was swayed by his friend's opinion. One of the other members of the Sanhedrin convinced him that this was the right opinion. הרי זה עובר בלא תעשה. This person violates a biblical prohibition. By the way, could it be that the person is guilty or innocent and he's making the right decision? Yeah, of course. But what's the reason he's making that decision?
Based off of somebody else's opinion.
Based on something that somebody else said and not based on what he himself has agreed the law should be. He violates a biblical prohibition. And that's what it says in the Torah. Velo ta'aneh al riv lintot. Not to lean the judgment. Mipi ha-shimu'ah amru. Again, from the shimu'ah we have a tradition. Shelo tomar b'shat minyan. That when it comes time to actually count those votes, don't say, Da'i sheyeh ki'ish peloni. That it's enough for me to hold like that great chacham. I mean, it's a member of the Sanhedrin. I'm like him. Ela emor ma shebefanecha. Rather, you must say your own personal opinion. Say it. Don't hold it back. Ubichlal ze, look at the second halakha, and included in this halakha, ubichlal lav ze, shelo yachazor hamelamed zechut b'dinei nefashot lelamed chova. That one who was arguing for innocence should not go back and argue for guilt. Shneimar, like again it says, v'lo ta'aneh al riv lintot. B'meh devarim amurim, when does this apply? B'shat masah umatan, in the deliberation stage. Don't argue both sides of the same story. Ava b'shat gemar din, but at the time where the decision is actually being made in the conviction stage, yesh lemelamed zechut lachazor ulimanot im hamchayvin. Then you can change your argument then. Because now it's the decision stage. You were convinced. You were convinced that you were wrong, and now you're allowed to change your mind. But you must argue for one side. Stick with it. Don't let yourself be defeated in the deliberation stage. Allow yourself to argue all the way till the end. And only when it comes time to make a decision, okay, that's when you have to vote the way that you believe you should vote. But there are two halachot here. One, you must always say your opinion, not somebody else's. It's lazy and it's unacceptable. Number two, if you were arguing one way, continue arguing that way till the end. Only in the execution stage, you have the right to vote the way you were convinced. Meaning that you're not that you were convinced by something, that you are convinced that is the correct way. You have to argue based on your conviction. Better word. Because it could be that by the time the Gemar Din comes around, the actual ruling time comes, that you were convinced that you were wrong. You were arguing the wrong side. What's the reason you have to continue arguing your case during the deliberation stage? What's the point of continuing to argue innocence? If I began with innocence, why am I continuing to argue?
It sharpens out the whole conversation.
Very good. You're pushing this agenda that maybe he's innocent, which maybe you're wrong for your reason, but maybe you're going to inspire someone else to come up with the real reason why he's innocent. Don't back down so quickly. Sometimes you try
So
to
don't-
say,
Also, don't we need to always look at someone for the innocent rather than first guilty? Or is that not?
not necessarily. No, but it's important though to stick to this for Chesky, you said the right reason. The reason is to make sure that you are going to keep this channel of thought open till at the end. If you're convinced that you were incorrect, fine. But while we're deliberating, it's important. There should be people who are arguing to bring about this action. That's again what you see by Halakha number 10. In chapter 10, nobody argued. So there was no room even to have this deliberation. Rabbi Chaim David Halevi is something very interesting. The deliberation stage, only at the end he can change his mind. The Rabbi Chaim David Halevi says something very interesting, that part of making a judgment in halakha requires two phases. Phase 1, deliberation. Phase 2, decision. If you make a decision with no deliberation, then you haven't actually rendered a halachic ruling. The halakha requires both stages to be fulfilled, and because in chapter 9 the Bedin didn't even deliberate, then it wasn't a real din. There's really nobody that is able to execute him because they didn't do this stage of deliberation. This is important. I want to share with you why it's important for all of us. Let me see if I can quickly pull up a relevant source for you, and if I can't, I'll just tell it to you, not from a book. Let me read this to all of us. It's important. I'm reading to you from Rabbi Chaim David Halevi's notes on the Rambam. Rabbi Chaim David Halevi writes the following. V'agav ochen nireh leha'ir. I want to, as I'm having this conversation with you about judges and the Sanhedrin, I want to bring up another matter on the same topic. Shisur ze chamuru ad meod. That this prohibition is a very severe prohibition. Ve'alul adam liyoto nichshal bo bekalut yitera. And we are much more susceptible to this problem than you might think, giving in to other people's opinions and not standing our ground. He said, I'm really only elaborating on the words of the Sefer HaChinuch that he quoted earlier. Shekatav, the Sefer HaChinuch wrote, mitoch kach, that because of this, yavo hadin kulo lefamim al da'at echad mehem, that instead of judging with a majority of 23 or whatever, you're going to be ending up that really all of the rabbis are just one opinion. Because if everybody is relying on the greatest opinion, then is it really all the members of the Sanhedrin who are deliberating, or it's just one chacham who made the decision? And one chacham can't execute somebody. When you see 250 rabbis who all went to the same yeshiva, who all studied by the same rabbi, and they issue a halachic ruling, is it 250 chachamim that are ruling something, or is it one chacham who's ruling something?
It's one.
It's obvious that it's one, and therefore says the Sefer Chinuch, you have to be concerned. If all of the rabbis start listening to the other ones, then it's not actually going to be a Sanhedrin that is going to be ruling on this law. It's going to be one individual who made a decision about somebody else's life, with many proxies, with many mouths. V'yadua hadavar kichen, who says the Sefer Chinuch, it's known that's the case. V'dvarav ha'acharonim, says Rabbi Chaim David Halevi, his last words, v'yadua hadavar kichen, that it's known that this is the case. As haracha murahim, our severe warning to us. Because when we have conversations with our friends and we listen to their opinions, ובפרט, אם נאמרת היא בטוב טעם ודעת, especially if they're presented elegantly, nicely, uvekoach shichnua rav, and your friend has the strength of there's a word, shichnua. Help me.
Convincing.
Of convincing. They're very convincing. There's even a stronger word. A persuasion. Your friend has the power of persuasion. There are some people that are really, really good at presenting their side of the story. They're very good at it. They say it nicely. They share it elegantly. You almost feel that if you argue with them, you must be crazy. Even though before that, you really didn't agree with them. מתקבלים בהשקפה ראשונה דברים הלב השומע. When we hear a convincing argument that is very elegantly presented to us, we usually accept it at face value. ואם לא יטריח עצמו בכל כוח תבונתו ושכלו לנתח הדברים באופן מעמיק, if a person does not train themselves to critically examine everything that they hear another person say, not just on a superficial level, but to go out of your way, to burden yourself, to deeply examine everything you've heard from somebody else, עלול הוא להיתפס לדעת חברו. Ultimately, you are vulnerable to becoming accepting of someone else's opinion, ורק לאחר מכן, and only later, ירגיש שדעתו האמיתית אינה כדעת חברו. Only later, some other day, some other week, tomorrow, you'll realize that you don't really agree with your friend. שנראתה לו נכונה במבט ראשון, initially you felt that you agreed. But now, 2 days later, after you've thought about it, maybe you don't agree. But then, when it comes to capital crimes, עלול להיות מאוחר מדי בדיני נפשות. ואפילו בדיני ממונות. When it comes to capital crimes, even financial crimes, it could be that you're going to realize that you were correct initially, only a few days too late. When somebody's already dead. When somebody's life has already been ruined. Because you chose to be lazy with the way that you accept other people's thoughts. I think that this idea is really where I should end. And perhaps I'm ending where I started the holiday of Shavuot in Kehillat Shaar HaShamayim. Can I tell you one last story before we end the shiur? It's okay? Is that a yes? Good. Let me bring a book. I'm going to read you a story. 1 second. Please give me a beracha. Then not only should I one day be able to reprint the books of Mori Harav, but also that I will be able to translate them into English for everyone to be able to understand them. B'ezrat Hashem. Now we have to remember, this is a different edition than the one that I have at home. I found. Listen to a story. And I started Shavuot in the Beit HaKnesset here, Kehillat Shaar HaShamayim. This is not a shameless marketing pitch. This is the truth. What I'll tell you now is that I merited, together with the Rabbanit, to have the most incredible Kehillah in the world. You are all a part of it. So every one of you, wherever you live, are a part of this Kehillah. This is home. But home, I mean, not in the replacement of Eretz Israel. Home as in, this is where we are right now. This is home for Shiviti. Not here to make shalom problems. I see some of you smiling. Not here to make problems. But I could not have done what I did here without the people who are here. Every single person who's part of this Kehillah on the ground holds these doors open, not just financially. I'm talking about emotionally, intellectually, religiously. They hold this fort down so that we could all have a place in the world that we know, at least in this one place, there's a normal Kehillah that if I had to run away to, it would be there. And I'm grateful. I know I'm teaching a New York class, but I'm singing the praises of my San Diego Chevra. Without them, we wouldn't have this. And then to you, to being part of it. But I can only give a derasha like this here. I can't give derashot like this everywhere else. That's why I'm here with you. My opening derasha on Chag HaShavuot was about the number one rule of what you need to know when you learn Torah. It's the most important principle that I can ever teach you. You need this in every area of Torah that you study, and I'll argue in every area of your life. Listen to a story. Okay? There's a story. I'm reading from Harav Peretz. הרי נקפד משכבו. סיפר רבי יחזקאל אברמסקי. Rabbi Yechezkel Abramsky, alav shalom, was one of the famous Ashkenazi Chachamim in Israel. He wrote a book called Chazon Yechezkel. He writes the following story. Neched HaGrazal, the grandson of the Vilna Gaon, the Gaon of Vilna, Haya Mushavo B'ir Varsha. He lived in the city of Warsaw. Pam achat, one time, Sha'al oto Gaon echad misham. One of the Gaonim who lived in Warsaw asked the grandson of the Gaon of Vilna, במה כוחו כל כך גדול של זקנכם הגר"א, ששמו גדול מאוד? What was it? What special quality, what strength did the Gaon of Vilna have that made him so famous? השיב הנכד, the grandson replied, אגיד לך קושיה אחת, ששאלו את זקני בהיותו ילד. I'll ask you one Talmudic question that my grandfather, the Gaon of Vilna, was asked when he was a young man. He was a child, really it says. ומה שתירץ על כך, ואז תבינו. And I'll tell you the answer to the question he was asked, and then you will understand how great my grandfather was. וזוהי, here's the story. למה במשנה הראשונה של מסכת מגילת תנן? Why in the first Mishnah of Tractate Megillah it says, מגילה נקראת, the Megillah is read, ביוד א', ביוד ב', ביוד ג', ביוד ד' בט"ו, on the 11th of Adar, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, לא פחות ולא יותר, not more and not less. ואילו במשנה שבמסכת שבת, בסוף פרק רבי אליעזר דמילה תנן, and in מסכת שבת it mentions, קטן נימול לחטא, לט', ליוד, ליוד א', ליוד ב'. A child can be circumcised on day 8, day 9, day 10, day 11, and day 12. Velo tenan sham, and it's not written there in Masechet Shabbat, lo pachot velo yoter. Not more and not less. So the Gaon of Vilna was asked a question. Mishnah number 1 in Tractate Megillah says, you can read the Megillah on these days, not more, not less. I mean, not earlier, not later. Better translation. But in Masechet Shabbat, when it talks about Milah, it says these days, but does not say not earlier and not later. What is the difference between these two halachot, that one of them requires the phrase not more and not less, another one says nothing about not more and not less? Hifsiko HaGaon miVarsha, Hanal v'amar lo. That brilliant chacham from Warsaw stopped him and he said, Hamtinu li ad she'omar lachem terutz. Wait for me, I'm going to tell you an incredible answer. V'amar lo terutz befilpul atzum v'rab b'meshech sha'ah. Shifli deched hagra. He said a pilpulistic answer, an incredibly brilliant answer, back and forth for a whole hour. And the Gaon of Vilna's grandson was really impressed. Nonetheless, he told him, but my grandfather, he had a better answer than that one. Amar lo Hanal, the rabbi from Warsaw, told the Gaon of Vilna's grandson, therefore, if that's the case, let me have a little bit of time to look into the matter further. And after 3 days they met again. And this rabbi said an incredibly pilpulistic answer, greater than the first one, about this question. And this time, instead of 1 hour, it took him 3 hours. And in this answer he even included the whole Torah. And the grandson of the Gaon of Vilna was so moved by the brilliance of this chacham, he went over to him and he kissed him on his forehead. And he said, בכל זאת, התירוץ של זקני הגר"א יותר טוב. The answer of my grandfather, the Gaon of Vilna, was even better than your 2 answers. Hana, this rabbi answered, more than what I've already told you, I can't come up with any greater answer than this. So what is that brilliant answer that your grandfather told them? The grandson answered, Zekeni Haga, my grandfather, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, Heshiv la shoel toch kedei dibur, responded immediately to the question, to the one who asked him, and he said, גם במשנה דרבי אליעזר דמילה כתוב מפורש לא פחות ולא יותר. Also in the second Mishnah, in Tractate Shabbat, it also says lo pachot v'lo yoter, not more and not less. No. What's the brilliant answer? I should start the story again? What's the brilliant answer? What happened? What was the Gaon of Vilna's brilliant
The
answer?
question was invalid. The question was invalid because what was the same?
He said both of the Mishnayot use the same words. Your question, the whole premise that you asked me a question from is wrong. Your platform is incorrect. You have to know sometimes to answer a question like that. I spoke here in the Kehillat and I said, the number one rule of learning Torah is to be able to think critically. If you accept every question and every answer and everything that you read as true, you are going to be lost in the world of Torah. By the way, maybe another side note, it helps to also know the Torah before you ask questions about it. Meaning, the Gaon of Vilna, because he knew the text, he was able to answer the question very quickly. The other Chacham kept going back to look at the text, but clearly never really sat down to examine the source text, which is a whole other problem. I could talk about yeshivot on a different day, not for right now. I can tell you that in the years that I studied Talmud in the yeshiva, the amount of time that you studied the actual Talmud, I don't want to embarrass myself that I spent time there, so I'm going to stop here. But at this point, I'm telling you that there's no greater gift that you can give yourself than to think. Your opinion matters. Yes, you and I might not be members of the Sanhedrin. Could be, yeah, we're not. That's right. But in everything that we hear, especially the things that are so elegantly spoken to us, sometimes people, Chacham Fur calls them poets, singers, magicians. They know how to convince people with very eloquent words. Moshe Rabbeinu, though, he wasn't a poet. Moshe Rabbeinu, he stuttered when he spoke. But he spoke the truth. So we took the truth from him. It's not about how elegant something is, not how beautiful something is, it's about how true something is. But the only way that you can guarantee that what you are thinking is true is to remove the shackles that make you bound to other people's opinions. And as long as you cannot think for yourself, then you're not really free. You are simply imitating and mimicking and puppeting. You're doing everything that everyone else around us does. And this could be about Torah. It could be about politics. It could be about your personal life. It could be about the way you feel about things in the world. It could be whatever it could be about. I'm not here to tell you every area of your life. Please, please treat yourself like you are a member of the Sanhedrin. Treat yourself like your opinion matters, and that if you were to hold back your opinion, you would be violating a biblical prohibition. A biblical prohibition of I also have the right to share what is in my heart. I also need to get my words out onto the table. That perhaps is the hallmark of this Beit Midrash. I've always told you, and it comes from here. I've always told you that my greatest nachat is when people learn with me Torah forever, and they still have the right to make their own halachic decisions. They still come and tell me, I learned this halakha with you, but I've decided differently than you. Good. I might not eat your food. I'm joking. I'm still, but what am I telling you? I love you for the fact that you don't. I told people, I said this in London when I was there. Imagine I came to the Beit Knesset and everybody tried to be like me. It would weird me out in ways I cannot even tell you. Imagine everybody dressed the same. If everybody did things, it's a crazy thing. Everybody is their own person. And it's a crucial part of what you bring to the table is you. We learn this in the laws of the Sanhedrin. Because in the Sanhedrin, if the Dayan holds back his opinion, he literally is going to destroy someone else's world. He'll kill someone else if he doesn't argue what is in his heart. So I bless us all that we should know that we should feel like that we should always walk on the path of Emet, even when it's not popular, even when the people around us may not give us the credit or the freedom to think the way that we do. But our rabbis tell us, Al tikre charut al haluchot, ela cherut. Don't read that the Torah is engraved on the tablets, rather, that freedom comes from the tablets. When the only thing that you are beholden to is HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Torah, and you have none of the pressures, none of the Jewish community, none of the rest of the world, none of anybody else, you are just free to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the greatest freedom. And once you taste that freedom, you can never go back to being a mindless robot like so many other people. I want to end the shiur offering my condolences to our dear friend, Zev Godkin, who lost his grandmother since the last time we had a shiur together. And I'm dedicating tonight's shiur in her honor. If you could just answer Amen, I'm going to say a short prayer in her honor. אשת חיל מי ימצא, ורחוק מפני מרחב. המרחם על כל בריאותיו יחוס ויחמול וירחם על נפש, רוח ונשמה של הנפטרת בשם טוב מן העולם. רבקה בת פסח, רוח אדוני תנחנה בגן עדן, היא וכל בנות צר שוכבות עמה, בכלל הרחמים והסליחות, וכן יהי רצון, ונאמר אמן. Thank you so much for learning with me.